Renya Niju's quiet apartment just got a whole lot louder. The most beautiful girl in class is standing in his room, dressed in a full maid outfit and looking at him with a gaze that's way too intense for a school night. As a token of gratitude, she begins, her finger resting near her lip. "I will become your maid, living for you." She's not just talking about cleaning the floors. Maiya is offering to wash his back in the bath and become the maid of his dreams to pay off a staggering 1 billion yen debt. Renya can barely breathe, let alone process that the school's idol just sold her life to him for a literal fortune. Let's rewind. A few months ago, Renya was just the class ghost, no friends, no girlfriend, and a home life he was actively running away from. He spent his days blending into the background of the hallways, arms crossed and eyes down, perfectly content with his own company. Even his childhood friend, Akiho Hikura, treats him like a contagious disease. She doesn't even look him in the eye as she brushes past, delivering a verbal slap that echoes in the quiet hall. "If you have nothing to say to me, don't talk to me." But then the atmosphere shifts. Maiya Kamishiro, the undisputed queen of the school, is suddenly standing right in front of him. She's clutching a book, her cheeks flushed, and the silence between them feels electric compared to the cold shoulder he's used to. Renya's secret is out. He dropped a book about maids, and she's the one who found it. He's bracing for the mockery, but instead of laughing, Maiya beams at him, genuinely interested in his hobbies. She isn't judging, she's leaning in. She's been watching him. She admits that seeing him always reading alone made her worry, but she doesn't think being a loner is a bad thing. For the first time in forever, someone actually sees Renya as different in a way that doesn't feel like an insult. With a playful finger to her lips, she asks to borrow the Maid book when he's finished. She's so bright and friendly it almost hurts to look at her, leaving Renya standing in the hallway feeling like he's light years away from her world. The peaceful school vibe shatters when Renya spots a black van and hears a scream. Maiya is being hauled away by men in suits, her face twisted in terror as she begs them to leave her alone. He doesn't think, he just moves. These aren't just thugs, they're debt collectors. Her parents fled, leaving behind a crushing 1 billion yen debt, and Maiya is the collateral. Even as she's being threatened, she cries out for Renya to stay away, desperate to keep him out of this nightmare. The collector sneers at the high schooler trying to play hero, but Renya just pulls a heavy ornate seal from his pocket. The air in the alleyway turns ice cold as the men recognize the crest. This isn't a toy, it's the symbol of the Niju family's absolute authority. He doesn't flinch. "I am Renya Nijou, the heir of the Niju family." He's talking about a conglomerate that owns everything from railroads to banks, with enough shadow world influence to make these collectors vanish. He pulls out a pen and a checkbook like he's signing for a pizza. A debt that would take lifetimes to earn. Settled with a few strokes of a pen, the collectors back off, stunned by the sheer absurdity of the wealth on display. Renya places a protective hand on Maiya's shoulder, his voice steady as he tells her, "Kamishiro-san, I will handle this." They walk away from the scene in a daze. Maiya can barely find the words to ask why he'd drop 1 billion yen on a classmate he barely knows. For Renya, that mountain of money is just a number, but for her, it's the weight of a world he just lifted off her chest. He opens up about his own isolation, a stepmother and stepsister, who made his home feel like a foreign country. He understands what it's like to have nowhere to go. Maiya looks at him, her eyes shining with a new, terrifying level of resolve. She vows to repay him, even if it takes her entire life. Renya tries to brush it off, telling her it's not her fault, but Maiya isn't letting him go that easily. She thinks he's incredible, and honestly, she's a lot smarter than she lets on. She thanks him with a smile that's brighter than any billion-yen check, leaving him scratching his head in total defeat. He says goodbye, expecting her to go home. She stands there, vibrating with awkward energy, until the truth finally bursts out. "Well, I don't actually have anywhere to go." The debt is gone, but so is her house, her parents, and her entire life. It sinks in. Her house was seized and she's completely alone. Renya, ever the problem solver with a bottomless wallet, immediately offers to arrange a place for her to stay. He figures compared to 1 billion yen, a rental is pocket change. He suggests a friend's house, but Maiya admits she doesn't have many close friends. She's staring at him with those wide, hopeful eyes, and Renya starts to get a very specific, very dangerous feeling about where this conversation is heading. She closes the distance, her hands clasped together like a prayer. She calls him her friend, the only one she has. Then she delivers the knockout blow. Could you let me stay at your house, Niju-kun? Renya is short-circuiting. Living together? For free? Maiya realizes it's a huge burden, but then her eyes catch a glimpse of the Maid book again. A light bulb practically explodes over her head. I just had a brilliant idea. Before he can object, she's dragging him into a store. She finds it, the perfect outfit. She tells him to wait, disappears behind the curtain, and leaves Renya staring at a wall, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The curtain pulls back, and the world just stops. Maiya stands there in a crisp, frilled Maid uniform, her hands lifting the hem of the skirt as she gives him a radiant smile. Thank you for waiting. It's everything from the book, brought to life by the prettiest girl he's ever seen. She leans in, her voice dropping to a whisper that cuts right through his panic. She knows his secret now, knows he likes maids. And if he won't let her stay for free, then she has a solution. Hire me as your personal maid. And that's how he ended up bringing a live-in maid home on a random Tuesday. Renya is mortified by the state of his place. Trash bags, clothes, the typical loner mess. Maiya doesn't blink, she's already rolling up her sleeves, declaring that cleaning up is officially her new job. Renya still can't believe this is happening, but Maiya plays her ultimate card, a mental image of her shivering in the cold, hungry and scared of ghosts. He can't kick her out now. With a defeated sigh, he tells her she can stay, just for tonight. So, the deal is sealed. Maiya is the maid, and this apartment is her new home. She's ready to cook, clean, and, she mentions with a wink, even wash his body in the bath. Renya's soul practically leaves his body. Babeth? The jokes fade for a second as she takes his hand. She remembers the impossible sum he paid for her. She remembers that he saved her. Her gaze is steady and sincere as she makes a final promise. I will become your ideal maid. Reality hits as the sun goes down. Renya realizes there's only one bed. He tries to explain that the property is huge and there are plenty of other rooms, but the awkwardness is already filling the air like thick fog. He offers to sleep on the sofa, but Maiya isn't having it. He's the master of the house, and it's against the maid code for him to be uncomfortable. She's pouting, he's blushing, and neither one of them has a clue how to handle the next 5 minutes. Maiya looks at the bed, then back at him, her cheeks turning a deep shade of crimson. She delivers the question that's going to haunt Renya's dreams for the rest of his life. Since the bed is big, we could sleep together, right? Renya's brain just hit an error 404. He's staring at the girl who just offered to sleep in his bed like she suggested they rob a bank. He waves his hands in a frantic blur, his face heating up fast enough to melt glass. No, it's not like that. Maiya isn't joking. She leans in, her eyes soft and dangerously honest. She explains that because Renya is the handsome guy who saved her, she wouldn't mind at all. The tension is thick enough to choke on until a stomach growls. Aren't you hungry? Renya tries to make a tactical retreat, but Maiya is already in full maid mode. She catches his eye with a look that says there's no escaping her gratitude. If there's no food, she'll make some, even if she admits her simple meals aren't exactly 5-star. She puffs out her chest with a confidence that would be inspiring if it weren't so suspicious. She promises to show off her domestic skills, but the universe has other plans. Of course, she yells, right before gravity decides to humble her. A loud crash, a flash of lace, and the ideal girl is suddenly a heap on the kitchen floor. She's fine, mostly, but her pride is definitely taking some internal damage. Renya can only watch in stunned, blushing silence. She recovers fast, pinning him with a gaze that's half vulnerable, half predatory. She knows exactly how to work the homemade meal angle on a guy. What do you say, Niju-kun? Maiya drops the bomb. If she cooks a good meal, the reward is sharing his bed. Renya's jaw is on the floor, but she's already sprinting toward the kitchen before he can even process the terms of the deal. It's a promise, okay? The sounds coming from the kitchen are less like cooking and more like construction. Maiya is staring at a vegetable like it's a piece of alien technology. Is this broccoli? No, Maiya, that is a carrot, and Renya's stomach is starting to regret everything. He sits on the sofa, trying to enjoy the fantasy of a beautiful classmate cooking him dinner. But the rhythmic thudding and clanging from the kitchen is turning his dream into a disaster movie. He's not hungry anymore, he's just worried about survival. Renya rushes in to find a pan filled with something that looks like it's trying to escape. It's bubbling, it's purple, and it's definitely not ginger pork. Maiya looks up, completely oblivious to the biohazard she's created. The ginger pork is almost ready. He stares into the abyss of the pan, and the abyss stares back. But then he looks at Maiya. Her eyes are full of hope and tears, and he realizes he can't back down. He picks up the chopsticks like a soldier going over the top. He's going to taste it. The moment the food hits his tongue, Renya looks like he's about to pass out from the sheer shock of the taste. It's not just a failure, it's a crime against culinary science. He doubles over the sink, clutching his throat while Maiya panics in the background. Gwa! The silence that follows is heavy. Maiya looks at her hands, her shoulders slumping as the mask of the perfect girl finally shatters. She admits she's always been clumsy, always getting scolded at home. I'm a mess. Niju-kun must be disappointed too, right? Renya isn't having any of it. He steps forward, reminding her that to everyone else she's the untouchable ideal. But her grip on her skirt tightens. If she isn't a useful maid, she feels like she has no right to stay by his side. Renya looks her straight in the eyes, stripping away all the expectations. He tells her it's not about skill, but about her just being there. That is where her worth is. After all, that's where the value lies. The tears clear, replaced by a fire that Renya probably should have been more afraid of. She vows to become truly useful to him. Dinner passes, showers are taken, and the night finally forces them back to the one question they both ignored. Thank you. Maiya emerges in Renya's oversized shirt, looking soft and dangerous. He tries to offer her the bed while he takes the sofa, but she isn't budging. In her mind, making her master sleep on the couch after everything he's done is the ultimate sin for a maid. She pulls out a logic that definitely wasn't in any maid manual Renya's ever heard of. She claims that in her world, this is totally normal. Renya blushes, warning her to be more aware of the situation. She gasps, covering her cheeks. You're thinking naughty things, right? The jokes die as she looks at the bed. She admits that after being almost kidnapped, the dark is different now. The quiet is terrifying. She needs the proximity because it's the only thing that feels safe. Sleeping alone is very scary for me. She looks up from the pillow, her eyes wide and pleading. It's not about the debt or the job anymore. It's a girl who's lost everything asking for one night of peace. I'll be sad and cry. Renya gives in without a second thought. He's being manipulated, and he knows it, but he can't say no. Renya slides in, keeping as much distance as the mattress allows, but the air between them is electric. Maiya whispers about her family issues, how she's always wanted someone to just be by her side like this. She's finally found her anchor. Maiya drifts off almost instantly, her face a picture of pure, peaceful relief. Renya watches her, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He's her refuge, her peace, and her protector, which means he isn't getting a single second of sleep tonight. Renya wakes up to a ceiling he doesn't recognize and a weight on his chest that definitely isn't his blanket. The morning light is filtering in, but his brain is still stuck in a fog of exhaustion. He stares at the ceiling, wondering why the air feels so warm and heavy. Then he looks down and his heart nearly stops. Maiya is right there, her face inches from his, breathing softly in her sleep. He can't even move without touching her. He stares at her, paralyzed, as a single question loops in his head. What is this feeling? Maiya's eyes snap open, and the silence of the room is instantly vaporized. She realizes where she is and who she's clutching, and her face turns a shade of red that should be physically impossible. She scrambles back, a blur of limbs and apologies, nearly falling off the bed in her haste to distance herself. Renya tries to play it cool, but his own ears are burning as he sits up. He tells her it's fine, but she's already spiraling into a deep bow. I'm so sorry. The panic dies down, leaving a quiet, heavy honesty in the room. Maiya sits on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tight, wondering if her forwardness was a mistake. But Renya doesn't pull away. He looks at her, his expression softening as he admits the truth of how he felt. It wasn't about the debt or the rules, it was about the girl sitting in front of him. He meets her gaze and delivers the blow that makes her heart skip a beat. It made me happy to feel that you trust me. Maiya isn't just taking the compliment, she's turning it into a mission. If trust is the goal, then she's going to be the most trustworthy maid in history, starting with the research material she found on his shelf. Renya's composure disintegrates the second she mentions the book. It's a maid-themed light novel, and he definitely didn't want the prettiest girl in class to know he was studying up on ideal maids in his spare time. He stammers an excuse, but it's too late. She's already determined to read it. Walking into Renya's private library is like stepping into another world, and Maiya is absolutely floored by the sheer volume of books. For a guy who tries to be invisible at school, he has a massive inner life tucked away on these shelves. He tries to play it down, crossing his arms and looking away, insisting that he just reads whatever catches his eye. But he can't hide the embarrassment when she pulls that specific Maid book from the stack. He tries to defend his taste, but she just gives him a knowing look. You don't have to be embarrassed. Maiya traces the spines of the books, realizing there's so much more to her savior than she thought. She's not just curious, she's looking for a roadmap. If this is the kind of maid Renya likes, then that's the kind of maid she needs to become. She asks to borrow his collection, promising to use them as a reference to improve her service. Renya watches her, stunned that his hobby is being treated like a professional textbook. Renya's internal logic is short-circuiting. He spent years building a quiet, solitary life, and now a beautiful girl is using his Mo novels as a job training manual. He suggests maybe a more educational book would be better, but Maiya is locked in. She points out that he clearly liked the characters in the book, so it's the perfect starting point for her transformation. She looks him in the eye, her resolve hardening. I want to be the ideal maid for you, Niju-kun. Her smile is blinding, the kind of expression that makes all of Renya's logical defenses crumble instantly. To her, it's simple. If he likes it, she loves it, and she'll do whatever it takes to bridge the gap between being a debt-ridden classmate and his perfect partner. She beams at him, holding the book like it's a sacred text. That makes it your ideal book. Reality crashes back in as the clock on the wall strikes the hour. They're going to be late. Maiya panics, turning to rush out, but her new ideal maid persona hasn't quite fixed her clumsiness yet. A stack of books slides, a foot catches on the rug, and suddenly she's buried under a mountain of literature. Renya just sighs, picking up the pieces as she mumbles about the room spinning. So much for the perfect service. Renya is face down on his desk, his brain completely fried after a night of no sleep and a morning of Mo-themed existential dread. He just wants 1 hour of peace before the school day starts, but the universe has other plans. A familiar voice chirps his name from right behind him, and he nearly leaps out of his skin. He turns to find Maiya leaning over his desk, as bright and cheerful as if she hadn't just spent the morning buried in books. What? Maiya flinches at his reaction, her hands flying to her chest in hurt. She's popular, everyone's watching, and seeing her talk to the school loner is enough to start 100 rumors. She leans in close, her breath warm against his ear, dropping her voice to a whisper that makes Renya's pulse spike. She knows the stakes of their arrangement better than anyone. Let's keep our living situation a secret, okay? A secret. The word hangs in the air, pulling a memory from the back of Renya's mind that he hasn't touched in years. He looks at his own hand, thinking of a pinky promise made a lifetime ago with a girl who used to be his entire world. Back then, secrets were a bond, a way to keep their world small and safe. He wonders when those bonds turned into the cold distance that exists between him and Akiho now. The nostalgia is shattered by a heavy hand on Renya's shoulder and a voice that's way too loud for the morning. Shiobara slides into their space, looking between the school's most popular girl and the loner with a smirk that says he smells a story. He starts digging, asking how they could possibly be close, while Maiya stammers out a desperate lie about them just being acquaintances. It's the school hierarchy in action, and Shiobara is currently at the top, making everyone uncomfortable. The pressure stops the second Akiho steps into the frame. She doesn't need to raise her voice to command the room. Her presence alone is enough to make Shiobara take a step back. She glares at him, her eyes sharp and unforgiving, acting as the shield Maiya didn't know she needed. She isn't just asking him to leave, she's issuing an order. Stop pressuring Shinjo-san. Akiho turns her attention to Maiya, her tone shifting from authority to a stern, almost older sister-like lecture. She tells her that staying quiet only invites more trouble, and that she needs to learn how to say no to guys like Shiobara. Maiya can only nod, completely intimidated by the sheer intensity of the girl standing over her. Renya watches from the sidelines, seeing the Ice Queen facade in full effect. The air in the room changes the second the name leaves Renya's mouth. He says it casually, like it's the most natural thing in the world, but to Maiya, it's a bombshell. First names are for family and lovers, not loners and class idols. Akiho freezes, a blush creeping up her neck as she snaps back at him, her cool exterior cracking for just a split second. Maiya looks between them, her mind racing to connect the dots. Are you good friends? Akiho's brain seems to spin in its sockets as she scrambles to provide a logical explanation. She nearly shouts the words, waving her hands as if to physically push the idea away. To her, admitting they're friends is like admitting a weakness she can't afford to show. She insists that being childhood friends is just a historical accident, nothing more. Her voice drips with a forced disdain that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Who would be friends with a guy like him? Renya doesn't fight it. He plays the role he's perfected, leaning back and agreeing that someone as perfect and responsible as Akiho shouldn't be associated with a guy like him. He lists her virtues like he's reading a resume, distancing himself from her even as he honors her. Akiho watches him, her expression shifting from anger to a quiet, frustrated confusion. He's making it too easy for her to push him away. The silence is broken by the one person no one expected to speak up. Maiya stands tall, her hand on her heart, her voice clear and unwavering. She isn't going to let him call himself pathetic, not after everything he's done for her. She looks Akiho right in the eye, claiming a spot in Renya's life that he never thought he'd share again. I'm friends with Niju-kun. Maiya's on a roll, her protective instincts overriding her common sense. She starts listing all the ways Renya is amazing, how kind he is, how he helped her when she was at her lowest, and then she drops the one detail that should have stayed behind closed doors. She mentions him finding her a place to live, and the entire room seems to tilt. Renya's eyes widen as he realizes their carefully crafted secret just went up in smoke. Renya is in full damage control mode, but Akiho isn't listening to his excuses anymore. She's staring at him, her eyes clouded with a bitterness that feels years old. She isn't interested in his housing arrangements. She's thinking about the gaps in his memory. She turns to leave, throwing a final, icy remark over her shoulder that leaves Renya reeling. Niju also forgets promises. Wait, he hasn't forgotten everything. Before she can step away, Renya speaks up, his voice steady as he calls out the one thing she thought he'd long ago discarded. He wishes her a happy birthday, and the effect is instantaneous. The Ice Queen melts in a heartbeat, her face lighting up with a genuine, bashful joy that leaves both Renya and Maiya speechless. She tries to hide her smile, but it's there, bright and undeniable. Thank you. You remembered. The Ice Queen isn't just melting, she's practically glowing. Akiho fumbles with her words, her tough exterior replaced by a soft, frantic energy as she brings up a gift from their shared past. She looks him in the eye, her voice barely a whisper when she asks, "It was a hairpin, wasn't it?" Renya is floored. He assumed that childhood trinket was long gone, but Akiho pulls out a small box like it's a holy relic. She admits she still wears it sometimes, and the shock on Renya's face is enough to make anyone realize this isn't just business for her. He can't help but ask the obvious. Do you really wear that hairpin I gave you all the time? She tries to play it cool, calling it a good luck charm, but the way she grips her chest tells a different story. The memory of a younger Renya handing over that gift hangs heavy in the air. He sees the genuine gratitude in her eyes, and can't help but feel a twinge of guilt for thinking she'd forgotten. Renya offers to buy her something new for her birthday, and suddenly, the air in the room changes. Akiho seizes the chance, leaning in with an invitation that sounds an awful lot like a date, but in the background, Maiya's eyes are wide and twitching. Akiho goes for the kill. Could you come shopping after class? Maiya isn't having it. She lunges forward, physically staking her claim on Renya's arm. It's a blatant power move, and the lie slips out before she can think. They already have plans. Akiho narrows her eyes, the temperature in the room dropping 10 degrees as she asks, "So, Niju and Kamishiro-san are on a date?" The tension is thick enough to choke on. Maiya pulls Renya away, practically screaming that it is a date just to end the conversation. She leaves Akiho standing in the hallway, fuming and confused, while Renya struggles to figure out how his quiet life turned into a battlefield. Maiya doesn't look back as she declares, "It is a date." Once they're alone, the bravado fades into a frantic explanation. Maiya isn't just being jealous, she's using Maid logic. She argues that since he's her master, fulfilling her wish to go out is technically his duty, so the date is legally binding in her head. She looks up at him with those shimmering eyes, making it impossible to stay mad. The guilt lasts about 5 seconds. Soon, they're drifting through the mall, bags in hand and smiles on their faces. For a moment, the debt and the secret arrangements don't matter. Maiya is genuinely happy, just being a normal girl next to the guy who saved her world. But the bubble bursts when Renya mentions the risks. Walking around in public as a couple is one thing, but if people start connecting the dots to his house, they're dead. Maiya's expression shifts from pure joy to a sharp, suspicious glare as she realizes his concern might be about someone specific. Renya drops the L word, living together, and Maiya practically short-circuits. She's worried about Akiho finding out, but she's also realizing just how deep the history between Renya and the Ice Queen really goes. She stares at him, her fingers twitching near her mouth as she wonders why he's so focused on his childhood friend's opinion. He confirms they were close, but there's a wall there. He speaks about Akiho like a memory he can't quite touch anymore. Maiya listens, her heart sinking as she compares her temporary role to the years of history Akiho has built into his life. She gets close, uncomfortably close, pointing out that he calls Akiho by her first name behind her back. It's a level of intimacy he doesn't even show to the girl living in his house. Renya looks away, admitting he can't say it to her face because she'd hate it. The gap between them feels wider than ever. Maiya drops a new anchor. Her own birthday is March 3rd. She's not just sharing data, she's marking her territory. She wants to know if they'll even still be together in 6 months. When Renya asks if she's into astrology, she can only puff out her cheeks in frustration. That's not it. He doesn't miss the beat. He promises her a party, right there at his place. The look of pure, unadulterated relief on Maiya's face says it all. She isn't just a maid, she's someone he plans to keep around. 6 months feels like a lifetime, but in this moment, it feels like a promise. Back at the house, it's maid time. Maiya is in full uniform, striking poses and trying to act like a professional from one of Renya's books. He's skeptical, but she's determined to prove she can do more than just share his bed. "You don't trust me, do you?" She charges into the chores with the confidence of a 5-star chef and the grace of a bowling ball. She grabs the laundry basket like it's a weapon of war, determined to show him that simple things are well within her grasp. Renya can only watch as the chaos begins to unfold. Then the unthinkable happens. She pulls out his boxers, then her own lace panties, realizing too late that some things should remain unsorted. The silence is deafening. Both of them turn a shade of red that shouldn't be biologically possible as the reality of their living arrangement hits them in the face. She pivots to cleaning to save face, but it's a landslide of errors. She's dusting before vacuuming, tripping over buckets, and creating more mess than she's removing. Renya attempts to offer advice, but she's already spiraling, her ideal maid persona crumbling under the weight of a single dusty corner. The bucket clatters to the floor, and the fight goes out of her. Maiya collapses against him, burying her face in his shirt as the tears start to flow. She's not just sad about the cleaning, she's terrified that her incompetence makes her useless to him. The warmth of her body against his makes Renya's heart hammer against his ribs. He doesn't push her away. He holds her, whispering that it's okay to fail. Maiya looks up, her eyes wet and searching, the distance between their lips vanishing as the quiet of the house settles around them. In this moment, there's no master or servant, just two people far too close for comfort. The front door didn't just open. It was practically kicked in. Akiho stands there like a vengeful spirit, her shadow looming over the tangled pair on the floor. Her eyes are dark, her voice a low, terrifying growl that shatters the romantic tension instantly. "What are you doing?" Akiho doesn't care about breaking and entering. She's too busy processing the fact that her childhood friend is currently cuddling the class idol in a maid outfit. She rants about the door being open, but her real focus is the betrayal. Renya scrambles for an excuse. But it's too late, the secret is dead and buried. Akiho snaps. She lunges forward, grabbing Renya by the collar and shaking him like a rag doll. The Ice Queen has turned into a hurricane of jealousy and hurt. She demands to know if they're dating, if he's been hiding this the whole time. Renya starts to explain that Maiya is a maid, but Akiho is way past listening to logic. Akiho isn't going to let Maiya have the home field advantage. If being a maid is what it takes to stay by Renya's side, then the competition just got a lot more crowded. She stares him down, her mind made up and her heart on her sleeve. From today on, I'll live here too. Of course, as a maid. The Ice Queen hasn't just entered the building. She's claiming squatters' rights. Maiya stands there, brain short-circuiting as she tries to apply her own trauma to the situation. If you're a maid in this house, you must be in the red, right? She looks at Akiho with genuine horrified pity and asks, "Does Hikura-san also have a billion-yen debt and lost her home, just like me?" The gears finally click into place for Renya, the static of the present clearing to reveal a buried memory. It's not about debt, it's about a ghost from 5 years ago. He gasps, the recognition hitting him like a physical weight, the promise with Akiho. Rewind 5 years, before the billion-yen debts and the school hierarchies. They were just 2 kids on a carpet, tethered by controller cords. Akiho wasn't an outsider. She grew up in the shadow of the Niju mansion because her mother was the one keeping the place running. To a little girl, Renya wasn't a corporate heir. He was just the boy who was too good at video games. Akiho saw a prodigy who could do it all, but Renya only saw the cage of his own name. While she looked at him with stars in her eyes, he was already suffocating under the expectation that he had to be perfect because he was a Niju. He didn't want to be a member of a dynasty, he just wanted to be himself. Then comes Sakurako, the gold standard of the Niju staff, tray in hand and a smile that makes the whole maid thing look like a fairy tale profession. To a young Akiho, this wasn't just service, it was the ultimate way to stay by Renya's side forever. Jealousy starts small, even in kids. Akiho catches Renya looking at the uniform and decides she's not going to be outdone by the staff. She leans in, her face flushing as she makes a bold, childish play for his attention. "Do you want to see how it looks on me?" A few days later, the transformation is complete. She's all ruffles and nervous energy, presenting a version of herself she hopes he'll never want to let go of. Renya's heart does a traitorous little flip. He's a kid, and his best friend just turned into something out of a storybook. It's not just dress up. It's a career path. She looks at the uniform her mother made and sees her entire future. "I want to be just like her," she whispers, her gaze fixed on a life spent serving the one person she truly cares about. She's wearing the heart hairpin he gave her, a tiny spark of silver that anchors the whole outfit. It's her lucky charm, and she uses the momentum to drive home a promise that would haunt them both for years. "Renya really pays attention to me, huh?" She climbs onto the sofa, getting right in his face to make sure he understands. This isn't about the Niju Empire, it's about him. She beams, her eyes crinkling with a terrifyingly pure devotion as she declares, "I'm not going to be a maid of the Niju family. I'll be Renya's maid." Renya smiles, that wide, innocent grin of a kid who thinks the world is simple. He thinks it sounds like a game, a fun way to stay together forever. He nods, sealing the deal with a laugh. "I think it sounds fun." But life doesn't stay in the playroom. The boss remarries, Akiho's mother leaves her job, and the physical distance between them starts to mirror the emotional silence. The hallways get longer, the texts get shorter, and little by little, they become strangers who happen to know each other's middle names. Fast forward to middle school. Akiho is trying to pull him back to the heir he was supposed to be, but Renya has already checked out. He's skipping school, burying his identity, and when she tries to remind him of his duty, he snaps. He doesn't see a friend. He sees a representative of the family he hates. "Then act more seriously," she screams. But the boy in front of her is already a ghost. He stops in the hallway, not even bothering to look back. The words are flat, designed to cut the cord once and for all. He asks her if she's just another person who only sees the Niju name before delivering the killing blow. "I'm not the Renya Akiho remembered from childhood." She collapses against the desk, the weight of his indifference crushing her. It's not just that he's changed, it's that he forgot. He threw away the promise she built her entire life around, and now she has to watch from the sidelines as he smiles at someone else. Back in the present, Maiya's brain has finally finished its marathon and arrived at the most logical, totally not insane conclusion. She points a finger, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and admiration. Is she a stalker? Akiho is flapping, her cool exterior completely evaporated. She tries to claim she doesn't feel anything for him, but she's gripping her jacket so hard the knuckles are white. Renya just looks at her, the guilt finally overriding the awkwardness. He soft lands the moment. "I'm sorry I didn't remember all this time." The apology is the opening Akiho needs. She goes for the jugular, demanding the job she was promised half a decade ago. "Will you hire me as your maid?" she asks, dead serious. Maiya immediately goes into defensive mode, inventing proverbs on the fly about how heaven doesn't have 2 days, and a house certainly can't have 2 maids. Maiya leans in, her personal space at 0, as she begs Renya to keep the staff count at 1. But Akiho is playing chess. She points out the obvious scandal of a teenage boy living alone with a girl and calmly mentions that in a normal house there are several maids. Akiho surveys the wreckage of the kitchen, the literal mess Maiya made trying to be ideal, and delivers the finishing move. She's been trained for this since birth. "I'm trained to become Renya's ideal maid," she beams, while Maiya can only sputter in the background about how that's definitely not it. The damp reality of her earlier failure finally catches up to Maiya. She's soaking wet and outmatched, so she retreats to the shower, leaving a lingering territorial look behind. Suddenly the room is quiet, and the childhood air between Renya and Akiho starts to thicken again. Akiho doesn't waste the one-on-one time. She starts folding laundry with a precision that borders on aggressive before dropping the formality. At school she's the ice queen, but here, stop calling me so formally, she demands, reminding him that the walls of this house are the only place where the old Renya and Akiho still exist. She looks up from the laundry, a bright, dangerous smile on her face. The maid role isn't a joke to her, it's a mission. She leans in, her tone shifting from bossy to genuinely excited as she drops the bomb. "I have an important request." She uses their history like a trump card, reminding him that childhood friends are supposed to help each other out. Renya's sweating. He knows whenever Akiho says she's not asking for anything impossible, the world is about to get very complicated. "Forget the details," she says, already moving to the next phase of the plan. She's not going to a costume shop. She wants the real thing, something with the weight of tradition and the scent of the Niju household. She looks him dead in the eye, her resolve unshakable. "I don't want a cheap uniform like Kamishiro-san's. I just want an authentic maid uniform." Renya realizes too late where this is going. There's only one place to get a uniform like that, and it's the one place he's been trying to avoid for years. Akiho smiles, the trap snapped shut, as she delivers the final destination. "Yeah, let's go to the Niju family house." Renya hasn't set foot here in years, and the massive wrought iron gates of the Niju estate make it perfectly clear why. Maiya looks like she's about to faint just from the architecture alone, her hands pressed to her cheeks as she takes in the sprawl. She barely manages to whisper. It's like something out of a movie castle. Renya tries to play it cool, acting like a mansion in the middle of Japan is a normal Tuesday, but Akiho isn't letting him off that easy. She questions Maiya's background, only to find out the prettiest girl in class lived in a modest traditional home before her world blew up. Then the heavy doors swing open, and the silence is shattered by a familiar face waiting on the grand staircase. She descends the stairs with the practiced grace of a lifetime in service, her classic uniform rustling against the marble. Sakurako offers a perfect curtsy, her eyes sparkling with a mix of genuine warmth and professional mischief. She doesn't miss a beat before delivering the line Renya's been dreading. "Welcome back, Master Renya." Sakurako doesn't waste time with formal introductions before diving straight into the gossip. She eyes the two girls flanking Renya with a devious grin, her voice dripping with mock jealousy. She moves closer to the group, noting that bringing home 2 adorable girls makes life very interesting, and she caps it off with a wink. "And you're even living together, right?" Without a shred of hesitation, Sakurako lunges forward and wraps Renya in a suffocatingly tight embrace. It's not just a greeting, it's a tactical strike designed to set the room on fire. Maiya and Akiho look like their brains are currently melting as Sakurako giggles right into Renya's ear. "Honestly, I'm a bit jealous, you know?" Akiho is practically steaming, her composure cracking under the pressure of Sakurako's blatant overstepping. The veteran maid just doubles down, teasing them about their special relationship and offering Akiho a turn to hug the young master. Renya is drowning in perfume and panic, while the woman who's known him since diapers continues to play him like a fiddle. Renya finally manages to peel Sakurako off and steer the conversation back to reality. He mentions his younger sister, Tuka, as a warning, knowing the little girl wouldn't appreciate this level of chaos. Sakurako just sighs, her eyes softening for a split second as she looks at him. "You've grown up quite a bit, haven't you, Renya?" Maiya's grip on Renya's sleeve is tight enough to cut off circulation as she realizes just how deep his history with Sakurako goes. When Renya suggests just borrowing a spare uniform, Sakurako's professional pride takes the wheel. She grabs a measuring tape with predatory speed, declaring they'll be making a custom outfit from scratch. Since it's a special occasion, let's take your measurements. Renya looks like he wants to hide in a closet, but Sakurako isn't finished with her lecture on his responsibilities. She reminds him that a Niju shouldn't be settling for hand-me-downs, especially not for the people he cares about. Her smile is blinding as she reminds him that, as the future head of this household, he needs to start acting the part and letting them serve him properly. Maiya's eyes go wide as Sakurako's finger points directly at her, designating her as the first project. The panic is visible in the way she clutches her hair, but Sakurako is already pushing her toward the dressing room. She shoots one last warning over her shoulder, her voice playful but firm. But remember, Renya, no peeking. Maiya is ushered away, looking like a lamb to the slaughter, while Akiho watches with a mix of dread and curiosity. Renya can only sigh as the heavy doors of the dressing area shut. He knows Sakurako can be pushy, but at this point he's just hoping everyone makes it out of this with their dignity intact. Behind closed doors, Maiya is stripped down to her slip, the reality of Renya's wealth finally sinking in with every lace and silk ribbon. Sakurako works with terrifying efficiency, her hands a blur as she begins the transformation. She keeps the conversation light, but there's a predatory edge to her questions as she prepares Maiya for her new role in the household. The room is quiet enough to hear Maiya's heart hammering against her ribs as Sakurako goes for the jugular. She asks the one question Maiya's been trying to dodge. Why is she really here? Money and debt aside, you don't live with someone you don't like. Sakurako leans in, her eyes narrowed with a knowing smirk. How would you describe Renya to yourself? Maiya's voice is barely a whisper, her gaze fixed on the floor as the words finally spill out. He's not just a benefactor, he's the person who saved her when she had nothing left. She admits it, the blush reaching the tips of her ears. He's someone I'm interested in. Sakurako's expression shifts from mischief to genuine advice, warning her that she needs to be proactive before Akiho steals him away. The doors slide open, and the breath leaves Renya's lungs. This isn't the girl who wears a school uniform or a simple apron. Maiya stands there in a deep black off-the-shoulder gown, the fabric hugging her curves and flowing into a dramatic ruffle. She looks like royalty, standing on the balcony as the sunlight catches the gold in her hair. She's absolutely breathtaking. Renya stammers out a question, trying to find his voice as Maiya sheepishly explains the ordeal. It turns out the elegant gown was just the finale. Sakurako put her through a gauntlet of costumes, from a bunny girl outfit to a nurse's uniform. Maiya is dizzy from the fashion show, her hands twisting in the dark fabric of the dress as she tries to handle Renya's intense stare. Renya manages a soft smile, admitting that Sakurako really does have a talent for this. He mentions that his sister, Tuka, is usually the one who has to endure these dress-up sessions. Maiya's heart skips a beat as she hears him call her cute for the first time in such a direct way. It's a small comment, but the weight of it in the quiet of the balcony feels massive. Maiya's eyes are wide and shining, her hand pressed to her chest as if she's trying to keep her heart from jumping out. The compliment hangs in the air, sweet and terrifying all at once. Renya doesn't look away, his own face heating up as he repeats it, making sure she hears him. It looks great on you, and you're super cute. Maiya reaches out, her fingers trembling as she takes Renya's hand, drawing him into her space. The elegant gown might make her look like a stranger, but the desperation in her eyes is all her. She looks up at him, her voice thick with emotion as she delivers her true intent. I want to be your ideal maid. Renya tries to tell her she doesn't need to worry, but she cuts him off, her resolve harder than steel. The world outside the estate doesn't matter in this moment. Maiya leans in, a small, sad smile playing on her lips as she admits the truth of her existence. She didn't just become a maid because of the money, she did it because it was the only way to stay by his side. She whispers it against the evening air, because I became a maid for you, Niju-kun. Renya is paralyzed by the weight of her words. He looks at this girl who has thrown away her pride and her past just to serve him, and he can't help but wonder what he could possibly do to be the ideal master for her. The silence is broken by Maiya suddenly snapping back to her cheerful self, twirling in the dress, and asking if she can be the one for him. It's a question he isn't ready to answer. By the afternoon, the transformation is complete. Both girls emerge in custom-fitted, authentic Niju household maid uniforms. They look identical, yet completely different. Maiya wears the look with a soft, eager smile, while Akiho stands with her hands on her hips, looking like she's ready to command an entire army. Renya is frozen, caught between two perfectly served ideals. Akiho isn't just wearing the uniform, she's weaponizing it. She steps into Renya's personal space, her face just inches from his as she makes her formal declaration. The childhood friend mask is gone, replaced by a fierce determination to reclaim her place in his life. She looks him dead in the eye. "I'm going to be a real maid, you know, so be ready for that." The room is thick with tension as the two girls square off, sparking an invisible war for Renya's attention. Sakurako, ever the chaos agent, throws a grenade into the conversation by suggesting they all stay the night. She notes that Renya's sister would be thrilled to have guests. Renya freezes at the mention of Tuka, a cold sweat breaking out as he realizes the piece is about to end. Renya tries to explain that meeting his sister right now would be a disaster, but the universe has other plans. A rhythmic pounding echoes from the hallway, growing louder by the second. The doors fly open with enough force to rattle the windows, and a high-pitched voice cuts through the room like a siren. "Oni-chan?" It's the sound of a very complicated situation getting 10 times worse. Tuka stands in the doorway, her hair in messy pigtails and her eyes narrowed with the kind of intense love only a younger sister can manage. She sees the two girls in uniforms and immediately points a finger at her brother, her own ambitions flaring up in a split second. She doesn't just want to watch, she wants a piece of the action. She shouts it for the whole house to hear. "I'm going to be your maid too."